Hello, friends! Today we're talking about something that has shaken India's aviation industry to its core. The first official report of the Air India Ahmedabad crash has been released, and the findings are nothing short of shocking. The release of this report even caused Boeing's stock prices to shoot up, reaching the highest they've been in a year. Why? Because many believe this report shifts the blame away from the aircraft manufacturer and onto the pilots. But is that really the truth? Or are we watching a blame game unfold against people who can no longer defend themselves? This report was published by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB. The full document is available publicly, but let me simplify its details for you, so we can all understand what actually happened inside that cockpit. The timeline in the report is based on Coordinated Universal Time, but for better clarity, I will use Indian Standard Time here. On June 12th at 11:17 in the morning, the aircraft left Delhi to land in Ahmedabad. Once it was parked, the crew filed a complaint in the pilot defect report. They wrote down just 3 words. Stab pos XDCR. That S short for Stabilizer Position Transducer. In simple words, the sensor that measures the position of the stabilizer in the back of the plane wasn't functioning properly. By 12:10 p.m., Air India's engineers claimed to have fixed the problem, and the aircraft was cleared for its next flight. The next flight was to be flown by 2 Mumbai-based pilots who had arrived in Ahmedabad the previous night, giving them adequate rest. According to protocol, the co-pilot was designated as pilot flying, while the captain was pilot monitoring. Both had passed their pre-flight breathalyzer test, so intoxication was ruled out. CCTV cameras showed them at the boarding gate around 12:35 p.m. At the time of departure, the aircraft was loaded with 54,200 kilograms of fuel, with a total takeoff weight within the safe limits. On paper, everything seemed perfectly normal. But then came the flight timeline that changed everything. At 1 hour, 38 minutes, and 39 seconds p.m., the plane took off. Just seconds later, it reached its top speed of 180 knots. And then disaster struck. Both engines shut down mid-air. According to the report, the fuel cutoff switches of Engine 1 and Engine 2, which are supposed to remain firmly in the run position, had been moved to the cutoff position. This effectively cuts the fuel supply to the engines, causing them to die. What's even more mysterious is that they were turned off just 1 second apart. Now, here's the chilling part. The cockpit voice recorder captured a brief conversation. After both engines shut down, one pilot turned to the other and asked, "Why did you cut off?" The other pilot immediately replied, "I did not do so." And then silence. The report doesn't tell us what was said after this. Who asked the question? Or who responded? This incomplete detail raises more questions than answers. Was this an intentional act, a grave mistake, or a system malfunction? The investigators haven't been clear, and this ambiguity has only fueled endless theories. Some say it could have been deliberate. Maybe one of the pilots was struggling with personal or mental issues and chose to crash the plane as a suicide attempt. Supporters of this theory point to the question, why did you cut off, as proof? Because if the switches had turned off on their own, wouldn't the pilots have asked what happened instead? But let's think carefully. If this was suicide, why would the same pilots turn the switches back on within 10 seconds? Why would they send out a mayday call to air traffic control seconds before the crash? These aren't the actions of men determined to die. And here's something important. Both pilots had solid, unblemished records. The captain had more than 15,000 hours of flying experience and was nearing retirement. The co-pilot had more than 3,400 hours and no record of mental health struggles. Both passed their alcohol test before the flight. Every shred of evidence points to professionals who wanted to keep flying, not people with a death wish. Friends, before I move further into the timeline of the crash and the unanswered mysteries that still surround this case, I want to pause for a second. If you're rewatching and feel that people deserve to know the truth rather than half-baked reports that possibly defame the very pilots who lost their lives, then please hit that subscribe button right now. Together, we can make sure stories like these are not brushed under the rug. Your support helps bring such hidden truths to light. Now, Back to the fateful minutes of the crash. Just 10 seconds after the engines were cut off, the pilots quickly tried to fix the disaster. They turned the fuel switch of the first engine back to on, and 4 seconds later, they did the same for the second engine. Miraculously, the first engine recovered, but the second engine never restarted. At 1 hour 39 minutes and 5 seconds p.m., the pilots made a desperate mayday call, repeating it 3 times. 6 seconds later, the flight data recorder stopped working the exact moment the plane hit the ground. And just like that, in less than a minute from takeoff, hundreds of lives were lost. The official report leaves us with haunting questions. Did the pilots themselves shut off those switches? Was it a mechanical fault? Or worse, was this an intentional act? Some aviation experts insist that it is almost impossible for both switches to be turned off by accident. The design of the Boeing 787's fuel cutoff switches includes a stop-lock mechanism. To move it from on to off, a pilot has to first pull the switch upward before shifting it. Brushing past it isn't enough. And here we're talking about not one, but both switches being flipped off within a single second. It stretches the imagination to call this an accident. Others, however, point out a little-known detail that could change everything. In 2018, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration issued a bulletin. They warned that some Boeing aircraft, including the 787, might have defective switches where the locking feature disengages, meaning the switches could be moved without pulling them. If true, then a light touch or vibration could indeed cause them to slip to the cutoff position. The FAA recommended airlines inspect these switches. But the catch is, it wasn't mandatory. It was just an advisory. Air India never carried out the inspection, and that could mean the difference between a tragic accident and a deliberate action. Adding to the mystery, the throttle control module of this aircraft where these fuel switches are located had been replaced twice. Once in 2019, and again in 2023. But the report confirms the replacements had nothing to do with the fuel switches. Could it be that a crucial inspection was skipped, and as a result, the fate of the plane was sealed? We don't know yet. What makes matters worse is how the report itself is written. It only quotes one line from the pilot conversation. "Why did you cut off?" Followed by, "I did not do so." That's all. But we know the black box must have recorded more. Why hasn't the public been told what was said after this? Are the investigators hiding something to protect Boeing or Air India? Even the Airline Pilots Association of India has accused the report of being biased towards blaming pilot error. Air Marshal Sanjeev Kapoor, Director General of the Indian Air Force for Inspection and Flight Safety, outright challenged the claim. He said no seasoned pilot could switch off both fuel controls of a Boeing 787 within 1 second. He believes both engines must have failed on their own, and the pilots were desperately trying to restart them. Think about it, why else would the pilots turn the switches back on within seconds? Why would they issue a mayday call? These were men fighting till their last breath to save lives, not recklessly sabotaging their own plane. Yet the uncertainty remains, and uncertainty breeds theories. Some claim one of the pilots may have intentionally caused the crash. Others argue strongly against it, pointing to their impeccable records, mental health, stability, and family lives. But in the end, only one thing can cut through this fog of suspicion: the complete release of the black box recordings. Until that happens, we are left with speculation and partial truths. Friends, this is just the preliminary report. According to international rules, a report must be published within 30 days of a crash. But these reports usually avoid pointing fingers. The conclusive report takes up to a year, and that's when the final answers may or may not. But will the truth be made public? Sadly, history gives us reasons to doubt. In 2022, a Boeing 737 crashed in China, killing everyone on board. 3 years later, despite the investigation being wrapped up, the truth has never been revealed. The Chinese government used the excuse of national security to keep the findings hidden. Could we see something similar here? So the real question is, will the families of those who perished, and the public at large, ever know what really happened inside that cockpit? Was it a tragic mechanical failure? Was it human error? Or is someone shifting the blame to protect corporations? These questions will keep haunting us until every shred of information is made transparent. Now, I want to ask you, friends, what do you think really happened? Do you believe the pilots are being unfairly blamed? Or do you think there's more to the story that hasn't come out yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this is the debate the world needs to have. Your voice matters in demanding accountability and truth.